So let's get started. Everybody keeps talking about how this is your first solo album, but in actuality, you've been really, really busy with a lot of production work. You released the album with Demanda Gallus, and you did a couple of soundtracks. What is it about this album that sets it apart from your previous solo-oriented projects?
Well, everything else I'd done was for somebody else, basically. I have to put it very simply. I mean, I've worked on everybody else's record for the past 35, 36 years. And I really wanted to do something that was just my own music, employing what I do. Employ my arranging skills, my production skills, engineering, instrumental, song, everything. And just to bring it all into my own record. It's for nobody else but me. And that's the difference to all the other projects.
Well, you're one of those artists who I've always put into a category with people like John Cale and Brian Eno and a few other people along those lines. So I've always felt were completely underrated simply because they somehow straddled the line between pop music and, I guess, composition, modern composition.
Right.
How do you feel you fit into the scheme of popular music these days, or do you just not consider yourself part of that world at all?
No, I just think I'm probably on the periphery. To me, the most exciting things in pop music, the most interesting things in pop music, always happens on the edges of it. Not that I don't have a lot of respect for the mainstream, and I listen to the mainstream pop music,
And you produce it.
And I produce it and I arrange it, but for my own music, I like to work on the edges and just see where this can go, where that can go. You know, that's what just keeps me interested. I mean, I play music every day on one instrument or another, and I listen to a lot of music, and I just like to, you know, if I'm going to do something, I want to make it worthwhile and musically artistically worthwhile. And just my own curiosity to see, well, you know, if I get an idea, well, let's just try it out and see if it works and see. I have this feeling, I really like rock and roll. I've always liked rock and roll, and whilst I've played other musics, and I certainly listen to everything else, I really enjoy playing rock and roll. And so I've always got the feeling, well, I'm sure I could make rock and roll, let's rephrase it, I just like to progress, just push form a little bit for me, personally, and see if I can just keep it rocking, you know what I mean, whilst making it a little more unusual, a little twisty, a little turny, you know.
Well, it seems to me that one of the things that's missing the most from modern day pop or rock music is that spirit of adventure, that spirit of experimentation. I mean, certainly back in the 50s and 60s it existed, and you got a lot of interesting music as a result. Probably because the record companies didn't know any better. They didn't know what was going to be popular and what wasn't, so they just signed everything, basically throwing it against the wall to see what would stick. And now it seems as if the companies feel like they've got a formula down, or they have it down to a science whereupon they know exactly what to look for, or they think they know, and they think they know exactly what they need to put out to get the quickest and greatest possible return.
Yes. Well, I think the trouble is they don't trust the music. They don't trust the band. They just all have too many shareholders, and it's all too corporate, and they have too many people that they have to give a financial return to. And they just can't take any, I mean, businesses like that simply can't take the sort of risks that small and mobile companies could. And especially companies that were literally run because people liked the music and wanted to hear more of it, you know. I mean, people like Ahmet Ertegun were really into rhythm and blues. And they just wanted to hear more of it and get other people interested in it. I mean, and so there's much less of that.
So can you describe a little bit of the atmosphere and the attitude of your current label? And it certainly stands apart from what we're talking about. And I thought it was great when I heard that you had fallen in with with Fripp's label, because I've been aware of them for a while, and it sounds like it's very, very artist friendly. And it seems as if they allowed you to make the album that you wanted to.
Well, what I did, in fact, I made the album first. Because I wasn't really sure what it was going to be and how it was going to turn out, so I just made the album first. I mean, I'm in a position to make the album first. Obviously, I'm quite fortunate that I have my own studio, and I don't need to put out albums to make a living anymore. so I'm in a very good position. So I made the album, and then, as I said before, one of the things I wasn't really looking forward to was actually signing with a major label. Although you kind of you feel that you need somebody who can actually has the muscle to actually get it out there. Otherwise, you're making an album for nobody. People don't hear it. So it's always difficult how to do it. So it happens that I share management with Robert Fripp. And I was asking my manager, well, what does Robert do? And he was telling me about his label. I didn't actually know about it before. And I looked into it and realized that, as you say, it was artist-friendly. They have a policy that all the artists on the label own their own copyrights and own their own masters.
That's brilliant.
Which is really important and almost unique in the business, I would say. There are no contracts. I have no contract with the label. I mean, we kind of agree what we agree the royalty rates and that sort of thing, and that's it. Either of us can just walk away.
That's amazing.
Well, it is, but actually it has resonances with Zeppelin, because we never had a contract with Peter Grant in the early days until Atlantic found out. It went mad, but so the early days it was all on trust as well. He could have just left us. We could have just got somebody else.
It's sort of like a gentleman's agreement. That's such a great way to do business.
Well, it is, and if it's working for you, then you'll keep going. If it's not, then sticking together is only a hindrance, isn't it? It's only an obstacle. So
yeah.
It makes common sense. It's common sense. It really is. And then a bit of research showed that they were quite internet savvy. They had good mail order, which I thought I might need. I mean, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen with this record, and they had a lot of enthusiastic distributors around the world, and some quite large ones and quite good ones. I mean, they have Ryco over here,
right?
Who have been tremendous. They've been great. My records have just...
They just have a great history of supporting... Ryco has a great history of supporting great artists, and, they had the whole Zappa catalog and
right.
all this other really out-there music.
Like what they're promoting, too. They're genuinely interested in the music.
Well, the interesting thing now is that there are radio formats that lend themselves to these kind of projects. I mean, here in the States, there's what they call AAA radio, which I guess is sort of progressive adult rock, and it's basically an offspring of freeform, FM radio.
Well, the FM underground radio, as it was when we started.
Yeah.
And that was tremendous in breaking Zeppelin, because we used to go out, turn up anything that had an antenna, we would turn up at, and they would just play the whole album, and then follow it with an Otis Redding album or something. It was just brilliant in those days.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing. You would be able to listen to a station. I mean, I'm a little too young to even remember it, but from what I understand from tapes I've heard, you'd be able to hear, a Ravi Shankar raga into a Ginger Baker drum solo into, something completely pop-oriented or a Broadway show tune.
Put it on and just sit back and enjoy it. It's great. It's great stuff. And, of course, today I mean, I don't know about the AAA station, but generally it's much more difficult. I mean, I can't get arrested on the radio, generally, unless they, for some reason, I blackmail them into playing it, by appealing. I mean, I do classic rock stations, I do interviews on classic rock stations, and then in the end they'll say, okay, what Zeppelin tracks do you want to play? And you go, well, don't you think they've had enough airplay by now?
Yeah, I have to say, I've been a very big fan of yours for a very long time. But, having grown up here in New York and, grown up a generation after the original Led Zeppelin fans, You know, I was a fan to start out with as a guitarist, but then after a while, you've heard all the songs already, and I was so relieved when I found out that you had some solo recordings out there. When I found the soundtrack for Scream for Help,
Right.
I was ecstatic. I said, finally, I get to hear this guy in an environment outside of what everybody has been forcing on me for so long. And it was great. I played that album out from beginning to end for
Oh, really?
months, and I drove all my friends nuts with it.
That's
But
fun.
it was so interesting, and it's so refreshing when an artist like yourself or somebody like Stuart Copeland
Yeah.
or John Cale or someone of that stature goes and does a film score. I think it's such an interesting way to hear an artist, you know, showcase.
Yeah, yes. But of course you're still writing music to order.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, it is program music, and but then, you know, I did it to the best of what, you know, to what I felt was needed, and I was probably committed to it at the time. And there's some good tracks on it, actually, apart from the obvious, the Crackback and the Spaghetti Junction ones with Page.
Right.
There's a thing called Chili Sauce on it, which I did all on synths.
I love that. Yeah, that's
Quite
great.
authentic, it's just, you know. And in fact, there's one, interestingly enough, for those who are into that sort of thing, the first steel guitar solo I ever do on record is on a thing called Silver Train,
That's right.
which we did with John Anderson.
It's a great album. I love it.
That's
And, you know, I saw the film also. I went and rented it, and it didn't quite stand up to the soundtrack.
Right. It doesn't quite. There was one magical part when we were doing the soundtrack that Keith Grant, who's a very respected film engineer and film music engineer in London, and used to run Olympic Studios, and he said, Pete, there's one point where the little boy kind of suddenly decides that his mum's in trouble and runs home, and forget the story, but when that happened, we were scoring the film, and the engineer asked Michael, and he said, Michael, he said, how does the little boy actually know that his mum's in trouble? And Michael just went, because he's a fucking genius. So there's holes all over the story, like
Yeah.
it was dreadful, really, but hey, what?
At least some good music came out of it.
Yeah.
Do you consider yourself to be a bass player? Or do you consider yourself to be a composer, or just an actual musician?
Well, a musician, but I consider Zuma as composed from the micro level, from the you know, like the notes and chords and melodies, and right the way to the macro, which is the arrangements, the production, the sequencing of the album. You know, just the order the songs come in. It's all part of the composition. It all has to have a dynamic.
Yeah, one of the things that to me seems to be a big problem these days also is that back in the late 60s and early 70s, I think you could probably count on the listener to listen to an album from beginning to end without interruption, probably with a set of headphones on and probably under the influence of something.
Probably, yeah.
But at least they were getting a full experience from an entire album. It was a piece unto itself. Almost like reading a book. Whereas nowadays, people will take a CD, they'll put it into their 6 CD changer and hit shuffle,
Right.
and half the time not even be aware of what they're really listening to.
Yeah. I mean, I try to give the album a sense. I mean, a lot of people have come actually back to me and said, you know, we really like the way the album flows from beginning to end. So there are people who are beginning perhaps to play it from beginning to end. But one of the things, again, I try to do is it's what, 48 minutes long, is it?
Yeah.
Something like that. I find that once you get over that, it starts, you know, you get an album that's like an hour and 5 or something like that, and I get lost about 3/4 through. I begin to forget what was at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To the point where it's too long. I know there could still be good stuff going on, but as an entity, it's just kind of too long. And in the old days, I mean, we used to have 2 sides. It was brilliant. You know, you do 4 songs, 5 songs, and then you could get up and turn it over. And so you'd actually program the sides so that the first side ended with a certain way, and then the second side began a certain way and took you somewhere else, and then to the end of the last song, which would be the climax or whatever. And so you'd have a dynamic throughout the whole album.
Yeah, it's almost like having an intermission in a way.
Exactly. So what I've tried to do is to somehow retain the dynamic on the CD, so that it's more like a traditional album format than anything else. There is like a little break in the middle.
Yeah.
And then it comes back in strong again. And so I think it's still worth doing that, because there are people out there who will put it on and play it right the way through.
Sure.
Especially when they find that they can actually get a little bit extra by doing that, rather than just shuffling from track to track.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the kind of album, and it depends on the artist. Certain artists, I suppose, are disposable in a way, and they're just going to have their one shot and their one album, and there's not any grand statement there. It's just a collection of songs, and they're putting it out there. And then there are other artists that I suppose are trying to make a complete statement rather than just collecting a bunch of tracks.
Right.
I'd like to talk for a little while about your production of other artists. I've always felt that there are two different types of producers. There's the producer who works with the artist to develop the sound of the artist and is almost an invisible entity on the finished product. And then there are other producers who definitely, like Phil Spector, who leave their stamp on the recording of whatever artist they're working with.
Yes.
What kind of an artist, a producer, do you see yourself as?
I tend to focus on rhythm. My rhythm sections are pretty strong, so that's where you can usually tell that I'm producing, as opposed to a different producer for the same band, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So my rhythm sections will always come up beefier than perhaps other people's, because that's how I like to hear them. How I like to hear them. But generally, I try and work with a band. I'm not like a Phil Spector that will put an imprint. Although I do have to say that the business needs both.
Yeah, I suppose some artists need more guidance than others, I guess.
Yeah, and what would we have been without a Phil Spector?
Right. Who are some of the producers that you've admired the most, or who you've enjoyed working with the most?
Well, I haven't worked with many producers. Oh yes, he's in arranging. Well, Scott Litt, obviously did the REM stuff. I like some Daniel Lanois, Wycliffe. Although I haven't worked with him.
I see George Martin on the list here.
George Martin, yes. Well, yes. I mean, but that's one of the old-time producers, isn't it?
Right.
The 60s and 70s. So.
And what have you been listening to these days? What kind of music and what artists? Whether it's
pretty much everything. Although I don't have much time on the road, I've just bought a pile of records. I haven't had a chance to listen to them. And I got the new Morphine and the new Primal Scream.
Oh, the new Morphine is great. I love that album.
Good. All right. I got the new Bad Livers, which I like. What else? I mean, at home I listen to a lot of Latin music as well, a lot of salsa, and I listen to drum and bass and techno. I listen to R&B. I listen to everything. I really do.
The Bad Livers seems like that's kind of, I don't want to say obscure, but you have to do a little digging around to even find out about a group like that. And also, your collaboration with Demanda Galas was such a surprise. I mean, I had been a fan of hers for years also. And
all right.
Cool. as much as I respected you as an artist, I don't think I ever expected the two of you to team up. When that album came out, it was a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I mean, somebody just put us together. Somebody said, you two should be working together. He was a mutual friend, and so we met up and talked about it, and we thought, well, yeah, okay. We've got quite a lot in common here. And she really wanted to do a rock record, and from Zeppelin, she always remembers the rhythm section more than anything else.
Right. So is that how Pete Thomas got into the mix? Did you bring him into...
Yes, the engineer that I had at the time, he recommended Pete Thomas because I was looking for drummers. And then, of course, I used Pete Thomas on this album.
Yeah. Another great thing that you did on this album was using the LSO on Snake Eyes, the London Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, well, that's part of what I do. So I thought, when you're composing something, basically composition is a bunch of questions that you have to answer. From from the basic level of how does this start. Usually you get an idea when you compose. You get a musical idea, and then you have to develop it. You have to start it. You have to just put it into a form, put it into shape, so that it runs and it keeps interesting, and And I came to the end. I was thinking through Snake Eyes, and I think, well, what can happen now? So I wanted strings on it. I wanted the strings on it. A string section playing blues lines, and then I thought, well, how's it going to end? And I thought, well, if I just write a whole other section, I can just fade the rhythm out and just leave this sort of fuguetta going. And then I went, again, being my own album, I just thought, okay, I'll get the LSO on it, and I blew most of the budget that I set myself. Went to Air Studios and had a ball for a morning and just put the strings on. It was great fun.
Will we ever see a orchestral album from you like we've seen from Paul McCartney or some other people?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I probably will do some orchestral stuff, but not as part of rock. I don't know. It's all right in small amounts in just the right place, but an orchestral rock album really just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
But I do contemporary classical music anyway, but it's usually chamber music.
I would love to hear some of that stuff. Is it available anywhere? I
There was some stuff on Factory, but that got deleted. I also do a lot of early music. New early music, if that makes any sense. It's usually with groups that have been doing early music and commission new composers to write new stuff for them, because obviously early music is finite.
Right. One thing that really caught my eye is, it says here in 1982 you taught electronic composition at Darlington College of the Arts at Devon.
Darlington, yeah.
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Just briefly, there was no big deal. I had a couple of students, really. I was down in Devon, and a composer friend of mine said, you should take, because I'd gone to see some concerts, and I said, I really didn't like this piece or that piece. I really didn't think it was much good. And he said, you seem to know what you like and why you like it. He said, why don't you actually take a couple of students and put your money where your mouth is, type of thing. And I did, and it was actually very instructive. I learned a lot from just being objective about what I thought was wrong with this, or wrong with this piece or that piece, and it was great. But I only did it for a couple of terms.
That's great. Well, I'd like to just wrap this up by asking you what we can expect in the future after you wrap up your tour. Do you have any other projects in mind on the burner for when the tour is finished?
Well, yes, I want to go back and make another album.
Excellent.
I really want to get back into it, and that was part of the plan, because I knew that touring really sorts your music out, it sorts your brain out, it gets your chops going, and gets rid of a lot of the dead wood. Can't bring it up on stage. You really got to do the business when you get on stage. You're standing in front. You can't hide, especially not in a trio anyway. So I've got some ideas, and I'm just going to go back and then just work on it as a project, and get another album out. I mean, it's time for my music. I've spent all this years and years on everybody else's stuff, and I want to just put all my energies in my own music for a bit.
Well, you have a lot of fans out there who are really, really happy to see that you're finally doing it, and we're looking forward to hearing some more. Thank you.
Thank you very much.